Moving on to our further involvement into the computer sciences space, I want to bring up our moderator for the next panel, Maria Clave. She is Harvey Mudd's president. She's the 5th president of Harvey Mudd and the first woman. She is also a renowned computer scientist. Yes. And she is basically the North American expert on diversity in the STEM practice. And I actually mean this from experience. I've asked the question, who do you think of when you think of who's been talking about and doing things for diversity in tech before it was as loud as it is now? And she is the name that I hear. So I'll let her take it away.
So first of all, just to brag for a moment, Harvey Mudd College graduated about 70 CS majors this year, 54% female. Ditto for physics, not as many majors, but more than 50% female. And engineering, it's anywhere between 42 and 56% female in a given year. So, and also we have a lot of students of color. And so yeah, we're really serious about diversity in tech. I'm delighted that I get to be the moderator of our computer science panel. It's a tough act following Stefano. So Stefano, good job, but aren't you worried that you're going to eat your brain now that you're sitting still? So I'd like to invite our panelists to come up. They are going to each take 5 minutes to tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do. And then I'm going to be asking them really, really tough questions. And my goal is to convince every investor in the room that the place you really want to invest is Southern California. Okay, first of all, we have Alan Gruber, who's the co-founder of the Brain Corporation. Next, we have Michel Sika, who's the founder and CEO of Lucid Circuit. And finally, we have Roberto Medrano, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Venture Network. It's all yours, Alan.
Okay. Is that a bit quicker?
Yeah, so the...
Oh, I think Lucid is first.
Oh,
I guess I'm going first.
Okay.
Yeah, he's scheduled for first, right.
Oh, my apologies.
Okay.
All right.
I thought they changed the order on me. Go ahead.
So let's imagine for a minute that you're relaxing on a flight when suddenly the plane falls some 650 feet in the span of a few seconds. No sooner do the pilots manage to regain control than it happens a second time. You get flung across the cabin and you're hit by falling luggage and flying objects. Sounds like a bad movie, right? Behold, the interior of an October 2008 flight from Singapore to Perth. 219 injured, 14 critically. I'm Michel Sika, the founder of Lucid Circuit. We're a startup out of Santa Monica, California, and we're bringing solutions to problems like these. So first of all, how can something like this even happen? Turns out that charged particles from the sun, amongst many other sources, can deposit pockets of energy in electronics, causing errors in calculations and eventually potentially causing them to actually fail. How do we fix this problem? Well, right now, up until this point, we pretty much have a Band-Aid type of solution. We pretty much have 3 of everything, and we hope that 2 of the 3 are going to be correct. So let's think about this for a minute. Every critical application out there either has 3 times more electronics, requiring 3 times more power, or is only 1/3 as powerful as it could be. This is incredibly wasteful. I mean, consider satellites. It costs $1 million just to send 1 pound up into space. So as we enter this age of AI, we're going to need to do a lot more computations. And many of these computations are critical. We're kind of okay so far because a lot of this machine learning is happening in the cloud. Unfortunately, this brings up 2 problems. The first problem is the machine learning is happening far away from the actual information sources that are used in the analysis. Also, it's far away from where the knowledge produced by machine learning is being consumed. So we have to worry about the security of the data transactions between the cloud and what's called the edge. The edge is where the knowledge is consumed and where the information sources are, by the way. The second problem is, as machine learning becomes smarter, we're going to need to take some of that machine learning out of the cloud and move it all the way to the edge in order for it to be efficient. So this is a huge challenge, because on one hand, we're going to need to do lots of computations really quickly while using as little power as possible. On the other hand, we need to ensure that our critical computations are not vulnerable. Remember, we need 3 of everything just to be protected. So how do we deal with this? My company, Lucid Circuit, is leveraging some proven research out of USC that mitigates this problem. And we're integrating it into our machine learning and blockchain chip called Astrum, which solves all of the above issues. Astrum is capable of doing lots of computations with extreme efficiency. So this is useful if you have CubeSats, so in the aerospace industry, if you're doing healthcare analytics, for instance. So imagine that you're in critical conditions. The medics will be able to use Astrum and AI in order to focus on the potential causes of your ailment, as opposed to simply reacting to your symptoms. Astrum also features some security features, such as in-silicon blockchain and in-silicon digital fingerprinting. This is to make sure that any of your data transactions are secure and private, and that any information stored within Astrum is also secure. So you can exchange patient records, for instance, or if you have smart contracts, your blockchain ledger, you want to make sure that doesn't get hacked. All of these features are integrated within the same chip, and they're protected by Astrum's resiliency feature, which requires only 4% extra power as opposed to the 300% needed today. That way we're protected from these charged particles. And so, because after all, if you're doing some type of cryptocurrency trading, you want to make sure your exchange doesn't go down. If you want to see an example of how Astrum can be applied in the medical field, check out our website at lucidcircuit.com/medical. So there are lots of markets for Astrum, particularly in edge computing. Some of the bigger markets are obviously aerospace and healthcare, but there are also emerging sectors such as blockchain. And so Astrum is essentially uniquely positioned to ensure that any machine learning and blockchain that you perform at the edge is done in an efficient manner, done in a secure fashion, and also resilient. What you see here, this picture here, this is an actual validation test where we actually use man-made high-energy particles to prove that our chip is actually very resilient and works appropriately. So far, we're leveraging some $30 million worth of research out of USC, and all of this is backed by actual IP. Our team members have over 15 years of experience in their respective fields. We've managed to raise some $1.4 million so far, and we have not given up any equity. And we're really excited about the release of the alpha version of Astrum sometime next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Michel. Now, Alan. No, now Roberto. Okay, nobody told me the order. Mose.
Yeah, so Roberto Medrano, I'm going to talk to you about how we're going to transform and enhance the venture capital world as well as the crypto world with our new blockchain technologies and how we use blockchain. This is basically tells you blockchain is a yet to be developed technology, so be aware where you invest and what you do with the blockchain. So just to let you know, in essence, most of the investments in the last 10 years, there have been about $600 billion on the last 10 years according to Crunchbase. And the next 10 years will be about 1.5 trillion in value. But most of those are really stuck in 3 problems. The 3 problems that we see today is that it's a lack of liquidity for both the equity guys, the venture guys, and the founders. The second thing is for the founders, most of their equity, most of their value is on those companies. So therefore, they're stuck until you get an exit, maybe 13 years later, if you're lucky, or maybe not ever. And then for some people that invest in the crypto side, there's going to be some access to best deals. And that's, we will provide that with this new. This is basically just tells you, there's so many companies that start, so many companies that you actually invest in, but at the end of the funnel, there's very few that are successful, and there's very few that actually return value to the investors and to the actual founders. What we try to provide here, it's a venture network that has a fund It's be estimated to be about $3 billion fund that has venture tokens, has what we call fiat money, which is the normal dollars or things, and it will have assets from equities that we invest into. And it also has a marketplace. So it's a fund, tokens, and a marketplace. The venture network, in essence, if you're not familiar, there's something called airdrops. It'll be about 3 trillion venture tokens. For every investment that a venture capital does, let's say they do invest $10 million, you get 1 token from us to the venture capital and to the founder team. So they get that. Then they can trade those in the marketplace that we are providing for them to create liquidity for them. And then for the places where we get the names of the funding, for example, Crunchbase has a list of people that get funded. Other countries in Korea, Russia, and other places, they have something like Crunchbase. We're also giving some partial token for actually providing the information for them. The win here is for all of us that the founder actually gets some liquidity and diversification of what they do. The investor gets the same as well because they can now trade for other things. And with the token, when we actually invest in companies as well, then we're able to get deals as well on that side. So that's very well. For the guys that invest in crypto stuff, the crypto buyer will be able to get a portion of some of the deals. For example, there's some deals where you have to have a minimum of $10 million, for example. And for many people cannot participate on that. Very similar to today, you cannot participate in those. But if we invest from our fund in there to our venture tokens, they can get a partial of that. Very similar to what happens today in the deals today where you have Uber or any of those. Many of the people cannot participate unless you're a large fund. We are actually democratizing that to provide more for the people that invest and more people that have a portion of those hopefully winning types of companies. So that's, and after the 10 years, this venture network, we have about 300 billion in assets based on equities and tokens, and we will give different tokens to the different funders as well as the different venture capital side. So I will skip this in terms of that. What we have is a combination of Silicon Valley people, and I live in Manhattan Beach now, but I used to be in Palo Alto for about 25 years. So it's a combination of us that were there. Keith manages today a billion venture fund himself. He also the founder of Crunchbase and many other companies in the Valley, including the press release. They say Silicon Valley people are creating this fund, even though I live in Manhattan Beach now, but I come here very often. So that's really what I wanted to present to you guys in terms of how we're going to change the venture world using blockchain and how we think it'd be more useful for people to invest in more deals, have a piece of those deals as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberto.
Okay, thank you. I guess last but not least. Okay, so I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Brain Corporation. And just a little slide about us. I tried to put as much on this slide as I could. We really started out with the problem of someday robots are going to be everywhere. How is that going to happen? Someday robots have to navigate among humans in complex environments where things change, people move around, things like that. So we came up with the idea that we would take existing equipment that did things already and we would put a brain into this equipment. We'd put an artificial nervous system in, which is how we came up with the name of Brain Corporation. What we developed basically was an operating system that operates the robot. Myself and my co-founder, Eugene Ishikevich, were both neuroscientists, but we play at the intersection of neuroscience and computer science, and I'll give a little bit more about how we got our company started, but we both met when we were in San Diego. I was at UCSD. I was on the faculty of UCSD, and Eugene was on the faculty of Neuroscience Institute, which is part of Scripps. And anyway, we founded our company in 2009. We released our product, which I'm going to show you a video of. It's a robotic floor scrubber. Think of it as an industrial strength Roomba. Or somebody today told me it's a Zamboni, which is something that we think of. It's massive. It's 800 pounds. You have to make sure when this thing moves in an environment with humans, that this is safe. And so we spent a lot of time working on this. We launched our product. My role in the company has changed. I have founded 2 prior companies, and I've done just about every task that you can think of in a company, including being a CFO of a company. And in this particular company, more recently, I was involved in sales and then marketing. And so I led the initial exercise where we segmented the market, decided what customers we would go after, and then landed our first customers. It's a little dated. We now have 160 employees, I'm told. We have about 100 plus patents. We had our first funding was by Qualcomm Ventures in San Diego. We're San Diego based, as I said. Our offices are literally about half a mile from San Diego, from Qualcomm. We had a Series A and a Series B by Qualcomm, and actually we have had a unique experience. We're actually incubated in Qualcomm. We had the first floor of the R&D building, and this is the first time Qualcomm did it, and they told us it's the last time. Whatever. Worked out pretty good. We were very happy, and they were very happy. And they continued to fund us when we moved out. We moved out because we needed to build a product, we needed a warehouse, we needed to build things. About 6 months ago, we received an investment, our Series C, from SoftBank Vision Phone with Matsuyosa. Okay. Whoops. Too much. That should play. There we go. This is our robot. This is autonomous. This is shows you some of our customer sites that we're in. Stops when the person opens the door. This is how you actually start it. You pull up a route you want it to run. It's got all these routes in its memory. This is going through a local grocery chain in San Diego. It's in autonomous mode. This is in the San Diego airport. I just want to say that we take our brain, which is a combination of software and hardware, and we put it in the machine, and it becomes a robot. There's a big difference between self-driving vehicles and what we do. We have a totally different environment. I just want to skip to the last slide. That's a map that we make. But this is how we came about. And this is what's unique in San Diego. San Diego has a very strong neuroscience community, which both Eugene and I came out of. I was at UCSD as a professor, and Eugene was in the Scripps at the Neuroscience Institute, and there's this other institution called the Institute of Neural Computation, something you wouldn't really know about, but it's an organization on what's called the MESA, which is where Scripps and UC San Diego are, and it has a lot of rich neuroscientists and computational neuroscientists, and it also moves throughout all of the Southern California area. We had a consortium that would go up to Caltech, UCLA, USC, Riverside, UC Irvine, and we all would move around. We all got to know each other. It's a tremendous resource. And this is the kind of thing that I think is really, that San Diego is really well known for. It has a specialty in neuroscience, and it's particularly in computational neuroscience. We touched a lot of other institutions along the way. As I was thinking this out the other day, the Supercomputer Center, where we did some simulations. IEEE is very strong. The MIT Enterprise Forum is strong. I was an advisor to the Entrepreneurism Center, von Liebig, which is part of the School of Engineering, and of course Qualcomm. We have a great relationship with the university now. We have interns that come over. We have a great relationship with Qualcomm. Several of the founders of Qualcomm sit on our board. We're very active in Connect, and we're very active in local institutions within San Diego. We're trying to promote San Diego because we think we've really benefited from the ecosystem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to ask each of you to tell me the 2 ingredients that you think are most important in your success. And I'm going to start with Michelle.
Right, I'd say we're based in Santa Monica, so just outside of LA. One of the biggest advantages for us is that we're near UCLA, USC, and quite a bunch of other UC schools. There are applied research organizations, such as the Information Sciences Institute. So we have access to actual researchers, specialists in the field. There's a pipeline. The other thing that's important is pipeline to students. Get fresh graduate students, and they're loyal, and they work with you. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Roberto.
Was that for the company or for us personally?
You can answer for your company or for yourself.
Okay, for myself, success has been because of education more than anything else. I have 4 degrees, 3 from Southern California, 1 from Northeast. I'm a graduate from SC, double E computer science. I went to MIT, double E as well, and I got an MBA from UCLA. And I came to Silicon Valley right after MIT, and I started right into the startups. So I did, the first 3 were public companies. Maybe you know them, Daisy Systems, Sun Microsystems, and Avnet. So I have worked for 5 public companies already. I have been in 14 boards that public companies have bought them, and it's all because of technology. Technology, drive, luck to be in the right place at the right time. And so that's been success for me. For my fund is success that I have an operating background. My largest job was to run HP software as a general manager. So that's, and I've been CEO and president of different companies here in the Valley. So I have the Silicon Valley connection, and I have the LA connection now. For blockchain, Venice and Santa Monica is very strong now for blockchain, so that's very strong for us to connect to that as well.
Great. And Alan.
I
know it's San Diego is number 1, right?
Of course. I think some of our, we've really, some of the success is the local community. It's been very supportive. It's very strong. I think one thing that has been important to us is, we had to grow really rapidly. We grew from 40 employees to 160 employees in the last 6 months. So we had to hire a massive amount of people. And actually, it turned out to be better than we thought because, like what people were referring to earlier, the cost of living is a lot less in San Diego. The traffic is a lot less. You can get around, except for a few periods of time. It's pretty easy to get around. And actually, so we had a lot of success. So I think actually being in San Diego is a value to us in that regard.
Fantastic. Okay, now I'm going to ask each of you to tell me one challenge that comes out of being in SoCal. And I will start with you, Alan.
Okay. One challenge is, it's kind of counterintuitive or not what you think, but we found that we were able to get a lot of engineers to come, but we had more trouble finding the other parts of what make up a startup company. So that was a challenge.
So the CFO, the marketing.
The CFOs are there. We have a community that we're aware of, but the other people that'll be part of marketing, that'll be part of customer service. We have a product in the market. So, that's been a little bit of a challenge. That's how I ended up being the head of sales and now the head of marketing.
That's good for you.
Yes.
It's a learning experience. Roberto.
Well, the challenge is still Southern California doesn't have the reputation yet that Silicon Valley has or Far East has. The management side is kind of still, you cannot find multiple guys like me, that you have several CEOs, president of startups. In the crypto side, on the blockchain side, everybody's very young guys. They're the young taking the risks now. There's really very few people that have done anything in the space to build a company. So they have not built companies. So that's kind of a challenge still, but it's very innovative because all the young guys are going after blockchain.
Michelle.
I'd say, so we're in the aerospace business, of course, and there are a lot of aerospace companies in that area. So our potential customers are right there. one of the issues we're running into is that a lot of the investors in the area are not educated about this area. And so it's hard to find the right investors, I'd say, in that vicinity. Yep.
Okay. So I think each of you could have, if you really wanted to, started your company in Silicon Valley. So why didn't you? And I'll start with Michel.
Well, one of the reasons is I believe in life and work balance. Right? It's very important. This is a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. I run long distances anyway, but you need to be able to, the beach is a 10-minute walk from our office. So you can go take a dip in the Pacific, swim for 20 minutes, come out, and you're recharged. You go back to work, and you become more effective. I think in the long run, it's also better for employees. It's a better quality of life. And it makes them more effective. That's what I would say.
Roberto, what about you?
Well, I spent, like I said, 25 years here in the Valley. I still have my houses in Palo Alto, so I come back and forth. But eventually I decided to go to Southern California as a personal decision, back to the beach, and I enjoyed the beach quite a bit. My last company, we sold it 18 months ago. It was based in Santa Monica, and we created there, and we had a good exit at the time. So I still think that there's even more activity than ever was in terms of new startups. And I'm in 4 SaaS companies that are all in LA, 2 AIs. I'm in their board. So that's very good. I'm in a couple of blockchains as an ICO advisor that are also in LA. So there's more things that are there that there were never before, as many.
How about you, Alan?
Well, yeah, I mean, we just grew up in San Diego, and so it was really natural for us to be in San Diego. But there were many times that people said, well, early on they would say, well, if you'd moved to Silicon Valley, we would fund you. And so we resisted that. But I think that for us, we've lived there a long time, and it was just really natural.
So if you're balancing between what's happening being based in LA, Santa Monica, San Diego, between the challenges and the advantages, how would that come out for you? Yeah, and you, Alan, first.
Well, you're saying where would we be better off?
Yeah.
Even in LA versus San Diego, there are a lot of advantages. LA is a much bigger town,
Right.
a lot more people, there are a lot more universities. But I think that, the community in neuroscience is so overwhelming, and the support of Qualcomm was so instrumental in our success. So I think that sort of weighs it to San Diego for us.
Michelle, how about you?
It's a tough question, because on one hand, we have access to all our R&D in Southern California. On the other hand, the capital is up here, for our industry at least. All in all, I think the issue of capital will be resolved shortly, and I'm hoping it will be resolved shortly. And so in terms of development and quality of products and retention of employees, I think it really makes sense for us to remain in the LA area. That's also where our customers are, so that's where we need to be.
I think it depends of what kind of company you're creating. For the all SaaS model, there's a lot of more advantages to be up here. But if you're looking at the blockchain, this thing is changing. If you look at the market capitalization of the top 10, top crypto, Bitcoin, Litecoin, all that stuff, only about 3 of them are United States grown. Everybody is China, Europe, Toronto, and one of them on the top 10 is from Southern California. It's EOS. I don't know if you guys know about EOS, but it's one of them that is a market capitalization today of maybe $12 billion, and it's not well known, right? But the world of the people in crypto know EOS quite a lot. So for crypto, you don't have a big advantage to be here, or blockchain. You don't have such a big, because there's enough stuff in the LA area going on. There's multiple things happening. Technology-wise, it can be done anywhere. And then now technologically speaking, blockchain companies are very distributed, meaning you can be anywhere in the world. And that's what's happening with the blockchain companies. You have people, even our fund, we distribute between Southern California, here, and Russia. So we got all these conference calls going, Zoom, so that's how we manage.
So one thing that I personally, so I started out my career at IBM Research in San Jose, so I lived in Silicon Valley for a while. Now I live in Southern California, and one of the things that seems very different to me is the level of access that companies have to universities, both faculty and students in Southern California compared to in the Bay Area, because you know, my sense of, I hang out at Stanford and Berkeley a fair amount, and my sense is that for faculty at Stanford and Berkeley, they have so many opportunities and people who want to work with them, that the chance that you could just pick up the phone and say, I've got this idea, can I come and talk to you about it, is much, much harder. Does that fit with your experience?
Yeah, in my experience, it was interesting because I was both at UCSD and later not at UCSD.
Right.
But yes, it's a very open environment. You can I could walk on the campus and go literally talk to anyone, and you know, in the neuroscience community, there's probably between the different departments 300 faculty members, and you can go in and talk to anybody. You can go to conferences, you can walk on campus and do anything you want, and it's just wide open. And even you know, I was from UCSD, but even San Diego State, which is a great institution, was very open, and we would go and meet some of the people there, and they have their own kind of incubator now, and even you know, all the other different universities. Yes, it's a very open environment, but also the institutes, like the Sanford Burnham Institute and this institute and that, and the Ventnor Institute, they're all very welcoming. So yes, I think you're right.
So what about you, Michelle? So you're working with USC and UCLA both?
Yes, one of our team members is from UCLA, actually.
Okay.
And so it's basically the ideal place to be. I mean, if I were building prototype chips at this point, if I need to do an edit, it's literally a 20-minute bike ride to go to use a heavy ion machine at USC. If I need to talk to the integrator, I can get on the metro and be there in 15 minutes. It's just, there's this concentration of experts in the various fields that we're working in that are just out there and
So
easy to access.
you're not experiencing the kind of, I mean, we had some comments on an earlier panel about, you know, the traffic issues in LA, et cetera, and you're not experiencing that at all.
I have a 5-year-old car that has 9,000 miles on it. I never need to drive. I can use the metro or get on a bike and pretty much get anywhere. Obviously, this was all very strategic. We made sure we were in the right place, right? If you're in downtown LA, it's a different situation.
What about you,
Yeah,
Roberto?
for me, I do a lot of stuff with Stanford from here, but in Southern California, I'm in the board of the computer science departments of USC. So I do a lot of stuff with them, and I bring some professors in some of the companies. Like the head of the AI for USC is now in one of my companies. It's an AI company. UCLA, I'm in the Eastern Technology Center as a board advisor there, so I play with them a lot. I go speak a lot in there as well.
So I'm going to ask each of you, if you could wave your magic wand and change one thing about Southern California with respect to entrepreneurship, startup companies, all those kinds of things, what would you do with that wand, Michel?
I would say, from the perspective of investors, right? You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. California is now again the 5th largest economy in the world, so it makes sense to diversify. There's microelectronics companies, AI companies up and down the board. There's no reason for all of this to be just in Northern California.
Roberto.
Same thing. The capital should be more distributed. It's no longer concentration of ideas in Silicon Valley or concentration of talent, so might as well diversify into other areas.
Alan.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I think there's really great opportunity in San Diego and LA. And I think that San Diego has interesting, waxing and waning of its own venture capital industry, but there's a lot of angel funding in San Diego, and as I said, there are companies that are easy to work with too. But it would be nice if there was a better venture capital industry.
So another thing that was said on an earlier panel was that, one of the real problems that Southern California has is it's distributed in the sense of, there's Santa Barbara and there's the Kavli Institute and there's a bunch of stuff happening there, and then there's Santa Monica, LA County, et cetera. And, I was listening to this comment about how many different towns and cities there are in LA County, and I know there are a lot. But actually, there are quite a lot in the Bay Area, too, when you think about it. But then there's San Diego. Do you think the fact that the communities are distributed is an asset or a liability?
Well, actually, just let me comment on that. In San Diego, there's really two main areas, and they're actually almost contiguous. It's what's called the Mesa, which is where San Diego is, and then Sorrento Valley, which is where Qualcomm is.
Right.
And they're almost contiguous areas. It was within 2 or 3 miles. So I think in San Diego, it's a very easy place where things could be placed. But, there are, I go all over, and everywhere I go, there's startups that are interesting. Somebody asked me, could I give them some advice on a startup in Indiana? It's like, startup in Indiana? So I think they're everywhere. So I don't see it a liability or an asset. I just see it as different.
What about you, Michel?
I don't particularly see it as a liability. I mean, most of the time, you're not interacting with city officials, right? And there's pretty good public transportation system, which means that there may be some sprawl, but because everything is interconnected through public transportation, that means, in general, anything on those routes is within easy access. So I don't really see it as too much as a disadvantage. I've only been in California for 2 years. I don't really know LA particularly well, but I've had no trouble so far.
Yeah, I think that's really an old Silicon Valley idea that you got to be centralized into a place. And I did work here for many years, so we used to want everybody to come to the office all the time. And now with all the technologies we got, with the Zooms, with the apps, with everything that we got, you can manage people without having to be in the office. In fact, some companies are shedding the offices away just to go and work at WeWork, or sometimes you need something like an office space, you go there to have a meeting. But to actually collaborate and do things with the new technologies that we got, it's just an old fallacy. Because people are still asking me from Silicon Valley, if I wanted to get to work for one of the companies here, I have to move, right? And I don't want to move back full time.
So it's interesting to me. I was talking to Ed Zimmerman a couple of months ago, he's the chair of the venture practice at Lowenstein Sandler in New York City. And I was telling him about the Alliance and, the frustration about the difficulty in getting access. I mean, it's easy to get angel funding. Typically, your A round is fine. It's when you're starting to really scale up that you get pushback. And people say, well, you should move to Silicon Valley or San Francisco or something. And he said, they used to say that to the startups in New York City as well. And they finally realized they weren't going to move.
Yeah.
And so at some level, I think that what we have to do in Southern California is we have to refuse to move. So my final question, or maybe not my final question, but getting towards a final question. So one of the things, I'm on the chair of a board of nonprofit called Ed Reports, and it does reviews of K-12 math, English language arts, and science curriculum. And it's my first experience working with an organization that is completely virtual in the sense the executive director lives in North Carolina, somebody's in Portland, somebody's in Houston, somebody's in New York City, et cetera, et cetera. And this is really sort of what you were talking about, Roberto, in terms of that's going to be the future. When you think about hiring somebody for your company, how much does where they're actually located matter to you now? So I'll start with you, Roberto.
To me, it doesn't matter as much anymore as it used to in the past. Because I have learned how to use the new technologies, how to use Trello, how to use Soho, how to use WeChat or any of the chat, Telegram. We use a lot of those technologies today, and I don't have to drive anywhere, by the way, because I just could be looking at the beach, and then one time I'm just talking to somebody on the phone, and they can see me as well. If I want them to see me, they can see me, and then we collaborate. The collaboration aspects of today are amazing now that I can do that with anybody in the world, and I truly do that every day.
Michelle, what about you?
I would say that it depends. If we're talking about research, researchers, in order to be productive, need to collaborate. So it's preferable that they be centralized. If we're talking about developers, developers are essentially hammers. No offense to any developers. They can be remote because they're not, I don't want to say they're not essential, they're important, but they're providing a skill. And so they could work remotely and we don't need to necessarily know them. For a researcher to work remotely, assuming they don't need any infrastructure, we would have to know them ahead of time. We do have a collaborator who works out of Portland, by the way.
Okay.
But I've worked with him for 7 years. So
Where were you before you moved to Los Angeles?
I was in DC.
Okay. What about you, Ella?
Well, we philosophically think that it's very important to have everyone together. Now, there are some exceptions, but really 98% of our employees are in San Diego, and it's been a good scenario. And we're actually in 2 buildings now, but we're all in the same area. The only people that are not there are salespeople because they need to be out in the field on the East Coast and other parts of the United States. So, we use a lot of, we obviously bring in consultants and we work with a lot of the technologies, and we do. We like Uber Conference, so we like that tool, and so we do a lot of virtual things. But we just like to really build a strong culture, so that's how we build.
Okay, so one last thing for each of you to say for why investors should invest in SoCal.
I think there's great opportunities. I think that's the main thing, and there's a lot of probably unrealized value or assets there. Let's put it that way. If you look back historically in San Diego, which I know a lot more about than LA, there have been a lot of very successful companies over the years, Illumina, Qualcomm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's just a lot of opportunities, and they find creative ways to get financing, but I think there's great opportunities.
Michelle?
I'd say, especially in my area, a lot of the companies in my area, because it's harder to gain access to investment, we've managed so far without any venture capitalist, which means we're solid companies. And there are many other companies like us out there between San Diego and LA. So we're essentially gems in the rough here, and there's a lot of potential that's being untapped.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of technologies that people or venture people should look at down south. You have less competition, you have good technology, you can develop the markets, and you can probably have valuations better than you will have up here. And people will stay longer at those companies than they stay here. Here is kind of a revolving door.
Churn.
Yeah, a lot of churn with people coming in and out.
That's a good point. A lot of the companies down there, the employees are a lot more loyal, so you can protect your IP. I feel there's a lot of effort in Northern California to make sure, because your employees are going to move all the time, that they don't really understand the big picture all that much because they're not loyal. We don't have that issue so much, I think, in Southern California.
Please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you so much.
Well, I can't put money to work, but if I could.